The step-by-step example as promised. As you can see, I've listed my 7 steps here. But guys, I promise you, the more you do of this, the easier it gets. And then you do it with almost no effort. And at some stage, you will be able to identify correctly what the terms will be in the back of the brackets and the front of the brackets in grade 10 as well. Right, so step 1, let's start. Multiply your first and your last term. 8 times x squared. So these are the numbers I'm multiplying. So x squared times 8 is 8x squared. Right, now we're going to work with that. So I have 8x squared and I have my table ready. You will have to draw one firstly. Okay, remember to write down all these methods and stuff into your book. So we're going to find the factors. So x is easy because it's going to be x times x. That gives you x squared only. Okay, but now 8 can possibly be, and I don't think I have enough values in here, but it could be 8, positive 8 times positive 1. Okay, or it could be positive 4 times 2, and then it could also be negative, but like I promised, I'm going to give you a tip here. So I'm going to erase this, we won't need this. We can find out whether we have to put positive values together with the factors in each of the cells in our table, or whether we have to put negative values. So if the middle term is positive, and here it is at the bottom. If the middle term is positive, you use positive in your table. If the middle term, that gives you the clue as to what signs to use. Because if you're going to add these numbers, if I add a positive and a positive number, the answer will be positive. If I add a negative and a negative number, the answer will be negative, right? So this only applies to when there is a positive last term. All right. So we now then can see, if we add here, we have 8x plus 1x gives you 9x for the sum. So this is the part where you do the sum. And these are your factors of 8x squared. Okay, so 8x times 1x gives you 8x squared. 4x times 2x gives you 8x squared as well. But then if I sum the factors, I get 9x for the first pair of factors, which I then see is not the value of the middle term. And then if I add the 4x and the 2x, it gives me positive 6x. Let's just write those positives in there as well. And that is then the actual result that I would prefer, because it gives me the middle term value. So these are the factors I have to go right. So where does it go? Step 5. They said you write your first term. Ooh, that's a highlighter. Okay, you write your first term. Then you write those two values, plus 4x, plus 2x. And then we have the last term, which is still positive 8. So the last term as in what we originally had. So first term from your trinomial. Then we basically just breaking the 6x up into the two numbers that combined to make the 6x and then the positive 8. And now it's the normal grouping that we did, the creation of a common bracket in the previous lesson. So I'm going to highlight. So here's my group 1. Remember what I did in the previous lesson? Here's my group 2. And I'm going to then factorize each of those groups. And in the first group, I have a common factor of x. There's an x in the first term, and there's an x in the second term. So I'm dividing this by x each. That's my common factor. So x is my common factor in the first group, and the remainder in the brackets will then be x squared divided by x gives you just 1x, plus x divided by x is totally eliminated and only positive 4 remains. Now I'm looking at my second group, and that's 2x plus 8. And I then know that both 2 and 8 can divide by 2, so that's a common factor. No variable common factors there. So I take out the common factor positive 2, and I go and divide each of these terms by the positive 2. And then that leaves me with a remainder in the brackets of, let me just say, 2 divided by 2, and that just leaves you with x for the first term from the group, plus 8 divided by 2 for the second number in the group is then 4. Right, I have created common brackets, and now I see my common bracket is x plus 4. I write it firstly, and then I want to see what remains in each term. So remember, you divide by that common factor in each term. So I'm dividing by x plus 4 over here, and by x plus 4 over here. Right, so x plus 4 eliminates in each one of those terms. So what remains in the first term? So that's only x. X plus, in the second term, only the positive 2. So plus 2. And that is how you factorize a trinomial step by step. And then the other note that I had at the bottom of the page was to check your answer by actually foiling. You can do it in your head. You can do it on a separate piece of paper just to check, does it give you this trinomial back again when you foil it? You don't have to do it. Please, I'm actually going to ask, don't do like add it onto your calculation. Then it looks like you don't know what you're doing. Okay, and that you think that you should possibly multiply it again. Okay, this should be your final answer. So let's look at some more examples where your last term is positive. Next one, I've put in the steps again here. I'm going to do this one with you again, and then there will be some of them that you can try on your own going ahead from here. So we have to, step 1, multiply first and last term. So x squared times 4 is 4x squared. Then step 2, we have to list the factors of 4x squared with the signs, and we know the signs will be positive because the middle term is positive. So the factors of 4x squared is, well, 4 could possibly be 4 times 1 or 2 times 2. So positive 4 times 1 and positive 2 times 2. And then, of course, for x squared, it is normally just x times x. Right, so those are the factors, but now I want to see which sum gives me the middle term value. Okay, so I want that value. And then 4 plus 1 is 5x, positive 5x, which is not the preferred answer I want, but 2 plus 2x gives me positive 4x, which is indeed my middle term value. All right, so I know, then I select my highlighter, and I know that the factors I have to use is 2 and 2. Right. So now we say that it is, let me just select the correct pen again. Step 5, they said first term from your original trinomial. So first term is x squared. Then those two factors, plus 2x plus 2x. And then the last term, which is or was positive 4 from your trinomial, so plus 4. And next step, we group. So let me create my groups quickly. First two terms and last two terms. Okay, now we go ahead and we factorize those groups each. So a common factor from the first group is both can divide by x. Okay, so x is my common factor for that group. What remains when I say x squared divided by x? Then it is only x. So I'm writing the remainder values from each term inside the brackets. Plus then here x divides by x to leave you only with 2 for that last term in that group. Now we see in the last group, or the second group here, that a common factor of 2 can be found in 2 and 4. And so if we take out that common factor, positive 2, and we write the remainder or calculate the remainder, then 2 divides by 2 to only leave you with x remaining from that first term in the group. And then for the last term in the group, 4 divided by 2 is positive 2. And so you'll see we've created common brackets, identical brackets in the two parts of the expression. And we therefore factorize those common brackets, x plus 2. When we factorize, remember that it means we are dividing by that common factor. Okay, so don't forget what the actual logical step is that's being applied. And basically it eliminates in each term for the remainder values, it eliminates the x plus 2 brackets. Then in the first term remaining I will have x, and in the second term I will have remaining positive 2, so x plus 2, which happens to be exactly the same value, is times x plus 2 is your answer. And remember, this can also be expressed as x plus 2 all squared. Right, now we have another example. I'm going to do it with you again so you can have a little bit more comfort getting used to following step by step. And then after this, I'm going to give you one to try on your own. Now, the step 1, you should be saying this by yourself already now. First term times last term, which is basically x squared times 12. And that gives you 12x squared, and that would be the value that we're looking for the factors of. So 12x squared. Now, the factors for 12 is, of course, a possible 1 times 12, positive. All of these will be positive. How do I know they're all positive? Because if I look at the middle term, I want a positive answer when I'm going to sum the factors. So, 12 times 1 gives you a possible 12, 3 times 4, and 6 times 2. And then, of course, x times x will give you the answer of x squared every single time. Okay, and now we sum the answers here. 12 plus 1, or 12x plus 1x is 13x. I go and look at the middle term, it's 7x. So no, that does not work. Then in the next one, it's 3x and 4x, which indeed does give you 7x. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I'm not even going to carry on to the next pair of factors, because obviously these are the factors that I'm going to use. What do we do in the next step? We now create a grouping situation where we write the first term from our trinomial, then the two factors, which is basically the middle term broken up into two factors, and then the last term plus 12. And now we go and we group these. So first two terms, last two terms. And we're going to now look for a common factor from each group and factorize. Common factor from our green group, the first group, is both can be divided by x. That's my common factor. Okay, and then, so x is the common factor. But what remains when I say x squared divided by x for my first term? That would be x. 2 minus 1 for the exponents, right? Then plus 3, because if I say x divides by x, then just 3 remains in that group. For the second group, I have common factor for 4 and 12 is 4. Both can divide by 4. Okay, both terms can divide by 4. And then therefore, right in the next step, that's my common factor. Now what remains? If I divide for the first term in the group here, 4 divided by 4, then it just leaves me with 1x. And then for the last term in that second group, 12 divided by 4 is, of course, 12 divided by 4 is 3. My pen wasn't ready there. And so we realize we've created those identical brackets that we're looking for. Now we go and divide each term by the common bracket, x plus 3. Okay, and then we have x plus 3 as the common bracket, or the factor that's common to both terms. And what remains if I divide in each term by the x plus 3? So basically it eliminates the bracket of x plus 3 if I've taken it out, and remaining from the first term would be x, and in the second term would be positive 4. So x plus 4. And that is your fully factorized form of the trinomial. For the next one, I want you to stop the video, try it on your own step by step. If you have to rewind first to go check the other steps because you really want to try this one on your own, to manage on your own, please do so. But now I'm going to go ahead with the solution. Since you guys are pausing, I'm not going to wait on the video. Step 1, I'm just going to write it like this time around, and you can also set it out like that in your book. Multiply the first term and the last term, x squared times 12, once again is 12x squared. So in my table, and you'll see then, if I draw a table in my book, I'm not going to do it and I don't have a ruler here with me, with my stylus on my tablet, so just excuse the not so straight line. Wait, I do have a straight line. Okay, so if I create lines here, and okay, I'm quickly going to pause and create a table. Okay, so that is how I would create my table. I would just draw lines. So I have cells to write in. I'm not going to draw a border and everything. This is in a test, this has got to happen very quickly. So the value I'm working with, of course, is 12x squared. And then the factors, like in the previous one, we know our middle term is positive, so our factor is going to be positive in here. And we know that it was positive 12x, just like in the previous example, and positive 1x being multiplied gives you 12x squared. Also positive 3x times positive 4x, and positive 6x times positive 2x. And now if we sum it, we get for the first value positive 13x, which is indeed my middle term value. So I go and highlight here, this is the value, or these are the factors that I'm going to then use in the next step. So this was step 2 till 4. Okay, so step 5, I just wrote 3. So step 5 now is where you write your first term from the trinomial, the factors that's been highlighted, and then the last term. Okay, so now we go ahead, and I want you to this time around purposefully write that 1 because it's going to become useful to us in some way. We highlight or circle our groups that we want to create so that we have those common brackets we want to factorize. So in the first group, and I'm doing the wrong thing here now, let me just go right, we're going on to step 6, of course. I'm leaving a bit of space because now I'm going to see what my common factors are. In the first group, I have a common factor of x. In each of the terms, there's at least an x. So we divide each term by x then. And then in the step 6, I write x as my common factor in the first group. And remaining from each term in that group, x squared divided by x leaves you with just x. And for the second term, if I divide x by x over here, my answer is positive 12 remaining for the second term in that group. Then I move on to my second group, and now You might have struggled with this one, but the common factor is 1. 12 has a common factor of 1. 1 has a common factor, well, has a factor of 1 that wasn't used correctly. So positive 1 is the value that you're just merely dividing by in each term. So positive 1 is my common factor, and then remaining would be x plus 12. It remains the same when you divide by 1. And now my common bracket, and I'm doing it again. It's just so I can show you step by step here. But my common bracket is the x plus 12 thing. Okay, so we're going to divide each term by x plus 12. And then write the remainders in a bracket in the next step. So step 7, the common factor is x plus 12, or the common bracket, and the remainder goes into the next set of brackets. So x plus 12 divides by x plus 12 every time, and then you have no brackets left. So then remaining in my first term would be x, and my second term positive 1. And so x plus 1 is the remaining value. And that is your fully factorized page. The next question, question 4. The difference from the first 4 examples we've done is now we have a negative middle term. So what did we say? If it's a negative middle term, then the factors in the table would just have to be positive and negative. Negative and negative. Sorry. So we now have to say the same factors. Okay, wait. Let me start at step 1. X squared times 12. And that gives you 12x squared, which would be what we're looking for the factors of. And so it gives you 4x, or negative. Now we know to write, let me just make space there, negative 4x and negative 3x being multiplied, or negative 6x times negative 2x, and or negative 12x times negative 1x. So if we sum it, firstly negative 4x and negative 3x, negative 4 minus 3 is negative 7x's then. And that is indeed the correct middle values. So we go and highlight these factors as the factors we want to use in our next step. So we say then that is x squared, first term, and then the highlighted factors, negative 4x and negative 3x, and then the last term of positive 12. So in the expression just created over here, that's just been created, we want to go and group our, make groups. So in our first group we have a common factor of x, so we go and divide by x. Okay, in our second group, okay, let's do the first group first. So then it is x as our common factor, and then if I divide x squared by x in the first term, the result is x to the power of 1. And then in the second term, if I divide negative 4x by x, the result is, let me just negative 4, because x divided by x is 1. And now we go to our second group and we find a common factor of 3. But remember what I told you in the previous lesson. If there's a negative as the first term in your group, or in the expression that you have to factorize, then the negative becomes part of your common factor. So our common factor here is negative 3 and not just 3. All right. And so negative 3 is my common factor. If I divide by negative 3 in the first term, only x remains. And then in the second term, 12 divided by negative 3 is negative 4. Now you will see we've created identical brackets, which helps us then So we go ahead and we divide by those identical brackets. That is our common bracket that we're going to take out in the next step as a common factor. So the common factor x minus 4, and now we want to find the remainder for the next set of brackets. So I'm sure you guys are quite used to the process now. We just find what remains, x in the first term, negative 3 in the second term. So x minus 3 goes into the second bracket. Okay, then we move on to number 5, your turn. So in other words, pause the video, try it on your own. If you have to go back and look at the previous video or the previous slide, just do that and then come back to the solution. You must want to try this on your own. Okay, right, so I'm going to carry on to the solution, and that would be number 1, multiply first and last term. That would be x squared times 12, which is 12x squared, positive 12x squared, of course. We don't normally write the positive. Then step number 2 is create a table. There we go, there I have my table all drawn. So it's 12x squared again. So it should be easy, relatively easy to find the factors now. But what you have to realize is the middle term, once again, is negative. So the factors have to be negative all around if I want to have a negative sum at the end. Okay. So they would, of course, once again be 1 times 12, 6 times 2, and 3 times 4. And then x times x would give you the x squared every single time. Right, now we sum for each of the factors, and negative 1x minus 12x happens to be the first ones in this that I'm using, and that gives you negative 13x, which happens once again to be my correct middle term value. Right, we see here it's negative 13x, and negative 1x and negative 12x gives you negative 13x. So then number 3, or actually let's try that again. So this is step number 5. This was step 2 till 4. So number 5, step 5 is you write the first term, then those factors that you highlighted, minus 1x and minus 12x, and then the last term, which is positive 12. And now we're going to group them. Okay, so I've got x squared minus 1x as my one group, and negative 12x plus 12 as my second group. So in the first group, I see, to carry on to number 6, that I have a common factor of x. Both terms contain at least an x, so x is my common factor. Remaining, we will see x squared divided by x. For that first remaining term, it would be x, and then negative 1x divided by x. We know then that x divides by x to become 1, so all that remains is negative 1 then. Okay, in the yellow group, we have a common factor of 12, but remember what I said once again, if my first term is a negative, then we have to also factorize the negative. So negative 12 will then be my factor that I'm going to use. And that is then in the next step, common factor, and now I'm going to calculate the remainder. So negative 12 divided by negative 12 leaves you with only x in this first term from my group. So x, and then the second term from the group, positive 12 divided by negative 12 gives you negative 1. And now we have our identical brackets, x minus 1, x minus 1, and that's what happens in number 7. Write your identical brackets. So then we're going to know that's the common factor. So we divide by that common factor in each term, and then we write the remainder in the second pair of brackets. So x and negative 12 remains. The last example I'm going to do with you today is just an extra example where there is an x and a y, more variables being used in the expression. Okay, so the steps remain the same. Just keep your head straight here. So it's x squared times 15y squared. First times last is then 15x squared y squared. Now that is the number we want to factorize for this step. And we know then that it's 5 times 3 that possibly gives you 15. We see our middle term is positive, so we know all our numbers should be positive since our last term was positive. Okay, so if this factor is positive that we have to factorize, we just take the sign of the middle term. So it's positive indeed. Now we have to say 15 would be positive 5 times positive 3, or positive 15 times positive 1. And then the only way I can multiply to get x squared y squared would be xy times xy for each of these. Because x times x would give you x squared, and y times y would give you y squared. Now for the sum, if I add together the 5xy and the 3xy, that gives me positive 8xy. And then you will see, I didn't want to write it in black, you'll see that that is in our exact middle term, 8xy. And therefore I proceed to highlighting that or making it visible in some way. This is the values I'm going to work with. For step 5 then we write the first term. Those two factors, 5xy and 3xy, and then the last term given to us in the trinomial, plus 15y squared. And now we go ahead and we factorize. Well, we first need to group those things, isn't it? So that's my first group, a red group, and my second group, a blue group. So for factorizing the first one, we see there's a common factor of x. So both terms can at least divide by x. And so x is my common factor in step 6. And if I divide for the first term by x squared by x, the remaining answer would be x. And then for the next step, if I divide 5xy by x, the x will divide by the x and become 1. So it's just 5y times 1 remaining. And you know that we just then write 5y. For the second group, we're going to look for a common factor, and we see there's a 3 in each. 15 can also divide by 3. 3 can divide by 3. And then there's at least a y. So 3 for each, and at least a y that we have in each of the terms. So 3y is the common factor here. So we write it in our next step. Positive 3y is the other group's common factor, and then we see what remains. So in the first term in my second group, 3 divided by 3 is 1, and then y divided by y is 1. So all that remains is x. Then for the second term in this second group, 15 divided by 3 is 5, and y squared divided by y, 2 minus 1 gives you 1. So it's y to the power of 1. So plus 5y to the power of 1. And now we realize again we have created identical bracket values. So we're going to divide by that common factor, the common bracket of x plus 5y in each of our terms. Okay. And in the next step, we say this is our common factor, x plus 5y. And now we go look at what remains. So remember, if we divide the same thing by itself, it becomes 1. And if you multiply anything by 1, it remains the same. So x times 1 is x remains for the first term, and 3y times 1 remains to be 3y then. And that is your fully factorized form of the trinomial that was given. So the work that is required of yourself to look at, to practice all of this, is on the next page. But so we've given you 2 days to do this. So for worksheet D, question 1 and 2, and exercise E, question 1 and 2. Then for worksheet D, the following day, number 3 to 7, and exercise E, number 3. At the end of the 2 days, just make sure you've done 1 until 7 for both of these activities. We'll have a look at the other numbers on the following week. You guys must have a lovely weekend and stay safe.